Welcome to another Walter Football video. I'm Charlie Campbell, Senior Draft Analyst, the most accurate mock drafter in the world. Here I am back on YouTube. I've done some mock draft videos with Walt and some draft prop bet videos with him as well. And I've been asked here and there to start doing some videos again. So now I'm fitting it in and getting back out here, creating some more videos here for the channel. So we'll get started here. Kind of a good off-season topic to me, and one that I find interesting, and really going through a power rankings of the general managers in the NFL. So without getting too into the weeds, I think you can just say that it's not fair to judge the new GMs. I mean, you can talk about, say, the Travis Hunter trade, and did the Jags give too much, and how did the first draft go with the Jets and Titans and Raiders, blah blah blah. But they haven't played a game yet. You can't make any judgments based on the fact that there's no win-loss record to determine anything at this point. So not including the Jets, Jags, Titans, and Raiders. I'd also say it's too early to include Washington with Adam Peters, Carolina with Dan Morgan, the Patriots with Elliott Wolf, and the Chargers with Joe Ortiz. Just 1 year is not enough. You could say right now it looks like Jalen Daniels obviously had a tremendous rookie year for Washington. Looks like he's going to be an elite quarterback in the NFL. But it's only 1 year. We've seen other quarterbacks have a flash in the pan one season, even their RG3 with Washington over a decade ago. So, you really need more time to go by to really pass judgment on GMs, and one season is just not enough. So, all right, so now we got 24 other teams. So let's get into it. I'm going to go from worst to first here. Starting off worst, I have the Browns with Andrew Berry. So Andrew Berry, I think, it's a little more complicated because the Haslams are such terrible owners in Cleveland, and you don't know how much they've forced his hand. But regardless, back in 2017, he was part of the evaluation high up in the Browns office there to pass on Pat Mahomes for Myles Garrett. That obviously was a big mistake for Cleveland, even though Garrett's a great player. Then he was part of the Browns trading 3 first-round picks for Deshaun Watson, which has blown up tremendously in Cleveland's face. They got rid of Baker Mayfield, who's gone on to lead Tampa Bay to consecutive division titles. So while he has made some nice draft picks, he's also blown some others. Jedrick Wills didn't get a second contract. That's a disappointment of a high first-rounder. And again, you don't know if the Haslams are forcing some of these decisions, like the Deshaun Watson trade. But at any rate, it's not good there in Cleveland. So Andrew Berry, 24th. 23rd, I have the Cowboys and Jerry Jones. He's had some good drafts. He's also had some horrible drafts. And this team just can't seem to get out of its own way and really get over the top when they do have good talent. So I have the Cowboys 23rd. 22nd, Brian Poles and the Bears. Brian Poles, maybe things get finally turned around there in Chicago, but I think he's done a terrible job with a couple premium resources. Obviously, giving up that high, 33rd overall pick in the draft for Chase Claypool was terrible, just a complete bust of a move there. Then he trades another high second-round pick for Montez Sweat, when if he had just waited a few months, Sweat was going to be a free agent. He could have signed him and held on to that pick to add another future starter. And you could say, well, what if another team signed Sweat? But in the same free agency class, you had Donnell Hunter, you had John Grenard, you had a few other good veteran pass rushers that were available. So if you didn't get Sweat, you could have gotten someone else and still had that high second rounder to add a starter. So I don't like what he's done there. We'll see if he finally gets it right with Ben Johnson now at head coach to tutor Caleb Williams. But at this point, I would have to put Brian Poles towards the bottom. Right above him, but not by much, I have Kwesi Adofo-Mensah from the Vikings. Now, There's a lot of Vikings homers out there that, rave about him, but really, I don't think that. I think that, first of all, everything's going to hinge on J.J. McCarthy. If that pick pans out, then he'll be fine. But if J.J. McCarthy is a bust, then Adolfo Mensa's going to get fired. But his first draft with the team in 2022 was an absolute disaster. He has the 12th overall pick in the draft. What does he do with it? He turns that pick into the Detroit Lions getting Jameson Williams, one of the most explosive wide receivers in the NFL. He took a top 12 pick and made one of his division rivals a more elite and dangerous offense. He trades down from 12 to 32, doesn't even get a future first rounder despite dropping 20 spots in the first round, gets a high second round pick, turns those picks into Lewis Cine, who is a complete bust for the Vikings, and Andrew Booth, cornerback out of Clemson, another bust for the Vikings. So that 2022 draft was a disaster. Really too early to pass much judgment. Obviously, on the 2024 class, with McCarthy not playing as a rookie, Dallas Turner deserves time to develop, of course. But overall, I think that the track record there from Adolfo Mensa has been disappointing. Next up, I have the Broncos at 20 with George Paton. Now, this one's a little complicated because once Sean Payton came aboard, he has all the juice there. From talking to people in Denver, every draft pick decision, all free agency decisions, it's Sean Payton driven at this point. Before that, though, Bo Nix obviously has had a good rookie season. But if we were doing this video a year ago, you'd probably have to have Peyton close to last or last. The Russell Wilson trade was a disaster and really crippled that franchise. Next up, I have the Saints with Mickey Loomis / Jeff Ireland. That's really the brain trust there in New Orleans. Jeff Ireland, I think, is really the point man on the draft. The Saints, I think Loomis had a nice run in terms of after the Super Bowl team with Drew Brees aged out, rehabbing, restocking that roster to get that team in position to go deep into the playoffs again with Brees late in his career before he finished up. But since then, they've kind of been a team that's just hung in that mediocre range. So in the contracts and the cap are a mess there in New Orleans, so I really can't give him a high ranking. The Giants I have next at 18, Joe Shane. I think we all know the Saquon Barkley decision was a mistake. The contract given to Daniel Jones was a mistake. We'll see if he is able to save himself with Jackson Dart, but I'm skeptical. And honestly, I feel like I'm a little generous having him at 18, but I do think Malik Neighbors was a nice draft pick. I think Abdul Carter is going to be a good player for them. Dexter Lawrence was a good draft pick. So he has taken some talent, brought in some talented players to the Giants. 17, similar kind of thing with Chris Greer and the Dolphins. He's brought in some talented players. The Miami was terrible when he took over. He got them to the point where they've made the playoffs. And obviously the health of Tua really kind of is the key, determining factor as to whether Greer's going to get fired at the end of this season or not. But definitely I think it's been a mixed bag for him. Same thing with Steelers and Omar Khan. He hasn't been there that long, so it's still an early judgment. But I think that it's a mixed bag in terms of the draft and personnel decisions in Pittsburgh since Omar Khan took over. 15, I have the Cardinals with Monty Ossenfort. I do think Ossenfort's on the rise. I think he's had a couple really good drafts the past year. In 2025, this draft, I thought day 1 and day 2 was excellent. And then I thought he did a good job in 2024. I think the Cardinals are a team on the rise. I actually really like them and what they could possibly be this season coming up here. So I wouldn't be surprised if Ossenfort is rated higher when we check back in on this next year. 14, I have the 49ers and John Lynch. So this might seem kind of low for John Lynch considering San Francisco's been to the Super Bowl a few times since he got there. But I do think, first, you got to preface it when saying that people with the 49ers and talking with league people, everything goes through the Shanahans and Kyle Shanahan. So that's the real decision maker for San Francisco. And in terms of John Lynch, he kind of executes a lot of the plan and the kind of direction that Shanahan puts forth from, what a lot of league people say. But they have had some great draft picks. Got obviously Nick Bosa was a home run. Deebo Samuel, great pick. Fred Warner, great pick. But you also had some terrible evaluations. I mean, in 2017, they took Solomon Thomas, in the top three, that did the trade with the Bears and Trubisky, but they took Solomon Thomas, who other teams had graded as a late first rounder, second round pick. He's a complete bust. Not only do they take him there, but they passed on Pat Mahomes. They probably wouldn't have lost to Mahomes twice in the Super Bowl had they just drafted him. And then they also blew it with Reuben Foster later in the first round that year. They put all those picks into Trey Lance. That was a bust. Javon Kinlaw was a disappointment. So really not a great great drafting record there in San Francisco since John Lynch took over. 13th, I have the Falcons with Terry Fontenot. Now, I do, similar to Austin Ford, I think Fontenot's on the rise. This is going to be a huge season for Atlanta and Fontenot. They got to turn the corner now, but I do think they've drafted some really talented players. I think they have a lot of guys with special skill sets there on that roster, on that offense, with Bijan Robinson and Drake London and Kyle Pitts and Penix. And now this year you add in two really potent potential pass rushers and Jalen Walker and James Pierce Jr. So I definitely think Fontenot could be rising in this ranking come next year, but it needs to kind of come together now. And I think Jesse Bates obviously was a huge home run grand slam free agency signing. So I think Fontenot could climb. I do like how they evaluate. I like how they take elite talent when it falls into their lap. 12, I have the Bucks with Jason Light. Some might say that's a little low for him, but to be honest, it's a complicated evaluation there because he's had some really high draft picks and early round picks just completely blow up in the face of Tampa Bay. Obviously, Jameis Winston didn't work out. Vernon Hargreaves the third. You had other second rounders that were busts, guys like Noah Spence or Austin Seferian Jenkins. One of the, I think, all-time worst draft picks in NFL history has got to be trading up into the second round to take a kicker in Aguayo, who was terrible for Tampa Bay. So that was just, horrible track record there. But it's feast and famine, I think. I mean, obviously, they had some great draft picks with Mike Evans, future Hall of Famer. Tristan Wirfs was tremendous. Vita Vea, tremendous. He's done a nice job of drafting secondary on day 2 and 3. You think of guys like Carlton Davis and Jamel Dean and Murphy Bunting and now Zion McCollum. I think they're going to have some more similar to that with Benjamin Morrison as well. So, it's a mixed bag. If Tom Brady didn't, if the Patriots hadn't screwed up that relationship with Tom Brady and he finishes his career in New England, would Jason Light still be the GM of the Bucks? I don't think so. I think that that just, happened at the right time and, kind of really turned a sketchy record into a success when Brady wins that Super Bowl with them in the first year there, caught lightning in a bottle. And to his credit, Baker Mayfield getting him off the scrap heap and now winning 2 consecutive division titles with Baker at the helm. You got to give him credit for that. So I'd say it's a mixed bag, but overall, I think he's one of the top dozen GMs in the NFL. Next up, I have the Texans with Nick Caserio. I think, you got to consider where the Texans were when he took over that team and the dumpster fire that Bill O'Brien turned that franchise into. I mean, he completely blew the prime years of Hall of Fame talents like J.J. Watt and DeAndre Hopkins and early years of Clowney and Deshaun Watson before he imploded. And, They had a lot of talent on that team. It gets completely blown up by O'Brien. The organization is toxic. It's just a complete dumpster fire. And now, after a few years, Caserio gets this thing turned around. They've been in the playoffs in consecutive years, advanced as well. So I think he's done a good job of taking a franchise that was absolutely at the bottom of the league and now putting them into the playoffs and building to something that could be special there in Houston. So I think he's done a really good job. I think Chris Ballard is an underrated general manager. I think the Colts just year after year draft a strong team. They've just not been able to get that quarterback position right to get them over the top. So that puts him back behind some of these guys, but he is a great talent evaluator overall. The Anthony Richardson pick really sticks out as potential horrible draft move, but there's a lot of people around the league that say that decision was forced by ownership. So you don't know the whole story when you hear those kind of things, but something to consider. 9, I have the Packers with Brian Gutekunst. I think he's done a really good job there in Green Bay. Took a lot of heat with the Aaron Rodgers situation. But that's kind of a mixed bag because if he had not taken Jordan Love and drafted talent, maybe they would have won another Super Bowl with Rodgers as opposed to having Jordan Love on the bench and not getting a player that could have helped Rodgers win and beat Tampa Bay in the postseason there in 2020. But regardless, they've had some good drafts on defense. Rashawn Gary was an excellent pick. He's added some other nice players there. So I think he's a smart GM. I think they scout well and they draft well. Bills I have at 8 with Brandon Beane. He's had some great picks. Josh Allen trading up for him in the first round was a home run. I think Ed Oliver was a nice pick. There have been some other disappointment ones, but it gets tougher to draft consistently well when you're picking late in the first round every year. So like Kaiir Elam was a bust. You had Benford that kind of in the same draft class that made up for it at cornerback. So I think they've been very good overall, but not quite elite. Next up, I have the Bengals at 7 with Duke Tobin / the Brown family that factors into it. But Cincinnati has drafted well. I think they've made some mistakes in terms of not keeping certain players like Jesse Bates. But I think they've obviously drafted well to go from number 1 overall pick with Joe Burrow to getting to the Super Bowl with Joe Burrow and now being a dangerous team that if their players can stay healthy, they could make another Super Bowl run. So I think the Bengals are a team that's drafted pretty well overall. 6th, I have Brett Veach with the Chiefs. So you might think this is kind of low considering the titles that have been won in Kansas City. But you have to keep in mind that the former GM, John Dorsey, was the one who drafted Pat Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Chris Jones, and Tyreek Hill. So a lot of the building blocks of this dynasty came through the Dorsey drafts. And Brett Veach obviously was a top scout who got onto the Mahomes talent right away and pushed that. You can go look that up if you haven't heard those stories. So he definitely was a factor in those strong drafts under Dorsey. But you gotta say, Dorsey was the one who really laid that foundation for this dynasty. So, but Veach has had some good drafts since taking over for Dorsey and has kept that team, in championship form to give enough support around Mahomes and Chris Jones on defense to pull off some more Lombardis. 5th overall, I have the Lions with Brad Holmes. I think Brad Holmes has done an incredible job. When you think of where the Lions were with what he inherited, he and Dan Campbell, after the Patricia Quinn just dumpster fire of an organization and how bad those drafts were with what they inherited there in Detroit. And then they go from a rough first season and having to trade Matthew Stafford to an NFC Championship game in year 3, and then winning 15 games in year 4. Brad Holmes done an amazing job in the draft, especially those first 3 years. You think of guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown as a mid-round pick, Aleem McNeil in the 3rd round, Kirby Joseph in the 3rd round. He got so much heat for the Jahmyr Gibbs pick at 12 and Jack Campbell. But in that same draft, he also gets Sam Laporta and Brian Branch, and I said it was the best draft in the NFL, and that draft helped propel them to knocking on the door of the Super Bowl. So if you look back at the draft awards, I love that draft, even though a lot of fools in the media were critical of it. It was brilliant, and I think he's done a great job. Now, the one caveat I will say in there, Detroit's been rated. The coaching, obviously, everyone talks about the coordinators leaving, but they've lost some key people in the front office. So they had the Washington hire, and then they also, Notre Dame stole one of their top evaluators to be their GM there in South Bend. So definitely, I'm curious to see how the Lions kind of handle losing not only the coaching talent that they've had around Dan Campbell, but the scouting talent around Brad Holmes. So that's going to be fascinating to watch. 4th overall, I have the Rams with Les Snead. Obviously, he gets them to the Super Bowl. They win a Super Bowl with Matthew Stafford. They gave up a huge amount of picks in Jared Goff for Stafford. That was a huge, huge expensive trade for the Rams. They gave up the first-round picks for Jalen Ramsey as well. They went, Goff was from Goff in 2016. Then they didn't have a first-round pick until Jared Verse, I think, in 2023, and they managed to draft well on day 2 and in the mid-rounds to help support these guys. And they used their draft picks to get veterans to win a championship. And then they had a down year after it, and then they've been back in the postseason 2 straight years since then. So I think Les Snead has done a great job overall in Los Angeles, and he's definitely a top 5 GM in the NFL. All right, number 3, I have the Ravens with Eric DeCosta. I think, he's in that elite category. In the top 5, I think if they just need to win one to kind of put him over the top there in Baltimore. But obviously, we all know Baltimore drafts well. They've done such a good job at team building through the draft, have made generally wise decisions in free agency as well. I think DeCosta's a great GM, definitely one of the best in the NFL. Number 2 overall, I have the Seahawks with John Schneider. I think he's made some brilliant draft picks. Obviously, Russell Wilson, that wins the Super Bowl for Seattle, gets them to another one. You think of other great picks like Bobby Wagner, but, I think he's done an amazing job in with steals in day 2 in the mid rounds, just kind of, and undrafted guys and in free agency, whether it's Tyler Lockett, Angry Doug Baldwin, Reek Woolen, just so many kind of unsung brilliant moves in the draft and in free agency to build a team that just consistently has been in the playoffs all those years with Russell Wilson, and then making the playoffs with Geno Smith at quarterback. I think John Schneider has done a tremendous job in Seattle. So lastly, number 1 overall, Howie Roseman with the Eagles. I think obviously the track record speaks for itself. I mean, they, having won the Super Bowl, was in it a few years ago and lost. A few years before that, they win it with the backup quarterback over Tom Brady. But Howie Roseman is just a mad scientist genius in terms of working the draft and moving up and getting elite talent for that team. You just wonder, how does it seem to happen year after year? And I think, even you haven't even seen the full fruits of what Jalen Carter can be yet, and Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean and now Jihad Campbell. I mean, that it's just amazing the team he's put together there in Philadelphia. So what they've done on the offensive line as well, the values they've landed there. So right now, I'd have to say Howie Roseman is number one top general manager in the NFL. So that's here the return to YouTube. Feel free to debate below. Let me know what I got wrong. If you don't like it, not a big deal. I don't give a shit. So whatever. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Let's definitely get some debate going here, and I'll be back with you guys soon. We'll get into draft stuff, of course, in the fall, and really hit on a bunch of things here coming up. So we'll be back with you consistently here on YouTube. You guys take care. I'll be back with you soon.